I first started appreciating the Southern Highlands for its water when I worked at Sydney Water. This is part of the water catchment for more than 5 million people, and it's provided sustainable water since 1960. In fact, before that, the Warragamba Emergency Scheme. Yet when the Boral coal mine shut and it flooded about 15% of the underground workings, that's what colour the Wingecarribee River went. It came out looking clear, but that ochre colour and that in the river, and that's when the mine shut. The pollution actually got worse. So I was alerted by the community. The community are the eyes and the ears of the environment. I was also alerted by the EPA, and I was really happy they did their job. We published the paper. I'm not happy about doing this, but I did take ABC there, and I didn't tell Boral, and they were really unhappy with me about that. But you also need to share the message. Water New South Wales, who managed the catchments, didn't notice that this was causing a big problem with water quality. Nickel. Upstream, Wingecarribee River, coming out the mine at it, that's the horizontal shaft. Nickel, these are the safe levels for the ecosystem of the river. And that was downstream. I'm going to come back to metals because that's in the tanks here. But also, this is actually my science. I look at the invertebrate life in the river, and the Wingecarribee River upstream of the mine was actually very healthy. 1/3 of the invertebrates in the river were these three groups: mayfly, stonefly, caddisfly, which I personally think are pretty sexy, but not everyone agrees with me. And platypus live in the river. Who's seen platypus here in the Wingecarribee? Excellent. A female platypus will need to eat basically about half her body weight a day when she's lactating. So they need a lot of invertebrates. Upstream, about 1/3 of the ecosystem. Downstream, in that ochre-coloured mire, under 5%. It was ecologically very sick. That's the same day. That's what the river looked like. It's extremely hard to get to, and I'm happy to say the community is pushing Boral along, and they are doing, I think, a reasonable job. I think they wanted to walk away from the problem. But sewerage, and I know I've talked with your group before about sewerage. This is up near the railway bridge on the Wingecarribee River. That is the effluent coming out from Bowral. The sewerage effluent is actually diluting the turbidity, the muddiness in the river. The stuff that's in that clear water is not good, but I've never seen that before in my life. It's diluting the turbidity. That river is so muddy. Do you find this normal? I know your whole LGA is a building site, but I don't think sediment is in control here, and it shouldn't be in the river. Also, the nutrients. I shared this slide before, and I know many of you made comments when the EPA reviewed the licence. I'm going to show another slide in a second. The sewerage is not treated to a standard that I think is commensurate with a catchment of this importance. What's my latest evidence? It's got very high nutrients. This is the latest data. The last sample from the Wingecarribee River at Sheepwash Bridge, it's one step away from being a toxic blue-green algal bloom, and it's cooling down at the moment. And part of that reason is because you've got so much nutrient. Can someone please tell Sydney Water this is our drinking water supply, and we need to upgrade this? And I don't think it's not legitimately, I don't think council can do it all by themselves. I think they need funding for the benefit for generations of people that drink the water in Sydney. Platypus. You've had a talk from PhD student Kat, who should have her PhD any hour now, who studied platypus. She got PFAS in the liver of a dead platypus at Berrima. We do not kill platypus. She's not killing that platypus. She actually shaved a bit of hair, and she's looking at the PFAS and other contaminants in it. But I've got concerns. We went looking when we found the PFAS, and this was the PFAS concentration, the forever chemical, in the sediment of the Wingecarribee River at Bowral. Am I the only person out looking for the source? I don't know where it's coming from. Why isn't there sense of urgency about this? We've published it, we've told the agency, I've told the EPA, told Water New South Wales. I don't have any answers for that. So that's where the dead platypus was handed in. Dead platypus are valuable, please let us know. Or Taronga Zoo, they're very valuable. And also, don't drown them. How many people are still using nets here, traps, to catch fish or yabbies, and they're drowning platypus? It's an absolute tragedy. I'm going to give you a warning. This foam is on the Balabula River out at Orange. PFAS does not like being in water. It's at very low concentration. It builds up in us, it builds up in the ecosystem, platypus livers, it builds up in the sediment, and it also can form foam. Watch out for foam in the river, and if you see it, let me know. And it's particularly in areas that are aerated, but we're here to talk about water tanks. So with Carmel, many of you have been in touch. We've come out and sampled water tanks. Thank you so much. We got the last results delivered from the lab last night. So what we need to do, we get into the top of a water tank and we spear with this cylinder. It's got a little ball in the bottom. We spear the bottom of the water tank, not to put a puncture in it, but to get a sample of the sediment and the water from the bottom, because that's building up in the bottom of your water tanks. Can I ask how many people here drink from water tanks? That's a fair representation. Okay. Provided your tanks stay full and the water is clear on the top of it, everything's good-ish. I don't have 100% great news, but I'm going to give you some tips. We're going to give a full and detailed analysis in time. The last data we literally got last night. And we're going to actually produce results for each person that we visited. This layer sometimes might be just 5 millimetres, it might be 30 millimetres. But when that is disturbed, look where outlets tend to be. Logically, they're at the bottom of a tank. Can you see the concern? And what is in that is generally pretty good. What is in that is putrefied evil in terms of metals. Is that a fair comment? Arsenic is one of the metals. You don't want to think about arsenic in your tank, but it is there. Now, arsenic is present in the Earth's crust. I don't know how many people we've told, but we're now using your data as one of the clean representatives. Southern Highlands, we've sampled about 50 tanks out at Narrabri, Gunnedah, Menduran, north of Dubbo, and around the Cadia. Full disclosure, I have been engaged for a class action up there and I'm helping the community. And that community is very appreciative to have access to data from your tanks, because we're now learning what clean tanks look like. This is the one that scares me completely. I have not yet been to a tank that has a safe level of lead. And I'm talking about everyone here, but particularly for children. Lead is a cumulative neurotoxin. We can take it up, we can't get rid of it. It will reduce the IQ and cognitive brain development. That's the safe level. Now this is in that layer down the bottom of tanks. Yours is by far the lowest so far, and we've sampled, I think, something in the order of 75 tanks now. That's a good data set. I'm really confronted by this. No one else samples like we do. Now, I've lived on water tanks, and I know every now and then, especially when the level gets down in a tank and you get a summer storm or something stirs it up, the colour of the water changes. Could be if you buy water. And I'm trying to convince authorities that this is really important. Is anyone surprised by this?
Where is Cadia?
Cadia it's south of Orange, and it's where there's a large gold and copper mine. It is a township, a settlement, but it's one of the biggest gold mines in Australia. But they make most of their money out of copper. But gold's sexier. And if you have a couple of those metals, they have buddies like lead. So we have taken so many samples. We have to often unscrew. To everyone that's helped unscrew the top of a tank before we sample, thank you. Now you'd think a university educated person would just open the tap, like duh. But we have to actually send the sampler down into the tank to get that sediment at the bottom. I remind everyone, keep clearing the leaves. And for us, the most difficult part of the project is actually unscrewing it and then putting it back together afterwards. I've started writing numbers down. We have been getting some of these samples from the bottom and pushing it through the filter. The filter lasts about a nanosecond before it clogs. We're going to be working more on that in the next iteration because we need to work out what we can do about it. We're going to be doing more work. We're coming to the end of the first phase. I think we've probably got enough data, but then we're going to move on to doing experiments on filtration and look at the value of doing this. But we're not going to keep doing this because we had to use how many? About 15 filters for one single sample. We used the syringe. We don't inject drugs or anything like that, but we push that at high pressure. It's really good forearm muscle exercise. But that's the answer, seriously, for if that sludgy stuff gets circulated and into your system, that's what the contaminants are associated with. And I don't yet have the graphics, but yes, we find PFAS in that sludgy stuff too. Not often, and this is particularly bad news for Cadia, we find it there about 5 times more frequently. Where we do detect it, the levels are way down. But to be honest, I was really surprised because PFAS is dangerous at levels of parts per trillion, which is something that is such a low concentration I can barely imagine it. A trillion seconds is 31,000 years. It's dangerous at about 5. That is a first flush device. Has anyone got, I know some of you do, first flush devices? Brilliant. So the first flush device will send the first runoff in a storm into often it uses like a floating ball cock, and it will send that and build up sediment. Brilliant thing to do. So basically, once you get a storm, all the dust that's built up in a tank and in the gutters gets flushed down, and you need to clean it out quite regularly. Cleaning gutters is also really valuable. So first flush device, regular cleaning of gutters, filter. I have lived on tank water, and I have been guilty of not having a filter and neglecting cleaning out gutters. It is definitely worthwhile, but these are really good things. And our next phase, we plan to look at how effective are they with experimental evidence. But your data is really important. Again, I'm just going to go back to that image of lead. You have the cleanest in so many of the metals. So with your permission and cooperation, we want to keep working with you and having access to your tanks to enable comparison with other areas. For example, Narrabri is a coal mining area, and there's about 5 coal mines. One's underground, there's 4 open cut. So every, I don't know how many days, there's blast, and the blast cloud comes over and settles on roofs and into tanks. So you're helping document that, but this community is particularly appreciative of having your comparison. It wasn't quite like that when we started, but we realised, wow, things are really clean here. But still, lead's a worry. This isn't a photo from the Southern Highlands, it's a photo from a filtration setup. I've seen some similar in the Highlands. That you do? They're worth thousands, aren't they? I think, don't have to say, but the maintenance on that one was $500 a year. It was roughly similar to my water rates in Sydney. I don't know if you need to go to that level. That's top level. That's absolutely top shelf. There's no doubt about it. The big thing is change the filter within specifications. One of the things I talked about when you first generously allowed me to come and talk and gave us access to your water tanks was I was concerned about the impact of solar cells on roofs. I've got to say happily, we're not seeing any contaminants coming off roofs with solar cells at this point. That's the first glance at the data. We've got the full data set has just come. I can't be 100% sure, but I think you're okay. Because a lot of houses in the Southern Highlands and other places collect electricity and water in their sustainable house. I did have concerns because some of the tanks I saw, particularly in the Menduran area, had some really high metals of great worry, cadmium and mercury. And we do get some of those levels, but at the moment, where's that from? Don't know. This is my last slide. Where are the contaminants coming from? We actually don't know. But look at this beautiful soldering work. It looks like I did it. Never get a scientist to do soldering work or welding. A lot of soldering used to have lead in it. And also a farmer in Menduran showed me some corrugated iron screws and washers, and the washers were pure lead. And then there's flashing as well. It's possibly not the best maintained roof I've seen. It's not from the Southern Highlands. But also the corrugated iron, that can have lead in it too. So some does come from building materials. But when you've got it roughly 5 or 6 times higher in one particular area, you can see the conclusion we're starting to draw. We can't be certain, but it's by association. I think I'm ready for questions, if anyone's got one.
When you actually do the water test, were you also testing the town water if it was there at the same time? See what sort of results you got out of that?
No, that's a great question. I have done it a little bit. Is there anyone, a councillor from Menduram or the Warrumbungles? Good, no. I did test their water because they said it was so bad they would only use it for flushing the toilet. And they wouldn't even use it on their plants, let alone drinking it. So we did test their water. Didn't have toxic metals, but it was really high in minerals. So it had that hard and had a bit of a sulphurous smell. Groundwater.
In relation to the roofing material, you're looking at an old galvanised iron roof there.
Yes.
And of course the other one, roof sheeting is now all... Is there any difference, do you think, between those two finishes?
Beautiful question. We could have designed that question. We're looking for that association. Because as we go around, Carmel's noting the materials for the tank and the roof and the gutters. So we're looking for that. Can I tell you, one of the biggest surprises for me, if you've got concrete tanks, it's got much higher pH because all concrete is slowly dissolving. Probably not in a bad way. Good, calcium's kind of good for us.
The difference between the actual material the tanks are made out of?
Not surprisingly, the old corrugated iron tanks, they're actually quite rare now to see them. They're full of zinc. Zinc is not something that is a huge problem for humans though. It has a taste issue. But at the moment, not seeing anything health related that is associated with tank material. But they're the sort of questions when we analyse this data set, we're going to give you some more details on that. And if you would have us back, we'll give a bit more detail.
I was just wondering, your data, do you correlate people who take from ponds and rivers to people who take from the roofs?
That's a good question. I don't know that we've noted that, have we? Generally, we would sample a tank, and I know for many people, they have tanks even just for garden watering rather than drinking water. So we probably don't ask many questions. I know, particularly in the inland areas, often people do top up with a groundwater pump or from the local dam or river. But at the moment, we've got basically 4 districts, and we basically are just comparing across those districts. It's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about that. No.
Oh, Ian, are there any soil types that are likely to leach contaminants more than others?
No, good question about the effect of soil. I'm definitely seeing the basalt soil here is that dark, sometimes like a ruby red. We get huge iron in your water, which is a good thing for us because that is good for our hemoglobin. So both Cadia, because that's got volcanics as well, it also has sky-high iron. That's the only influence I'm seeing at this stage. Otherwise, we get a kaleidoscope of different metals. The next phase, we want to play around and find out the effects and benefits of filtration. We know it's helpful, that's pretty obvious, and particularly when you see the filters, but we want to have experimental evidence. Cross my fingers, I'm having a meeting with the head of the EPA on Friday because they're giving advice that people should filter, but I want scientific evidence to back that up.
Just talking about filtration, I'm using a 5 micron. Is that good enough?
Oh, great question. I got to remember that. The filters we were using were 0.5 micron, and they were an absolute pain in the backside to try and squeeze it through. We want to test different filter sizes and work out what is adequate. And it's particularly for when you get those circumstances when that sediment gets up into your house system. I'm going to make one, if I may, one final point. We also want to look at what happens with the sludge down the bottom, because we know it's full of these metals and PFAS. What should you do with it? Because at the moment, a lot of tank cleaning just dumps it on the ground. I wouldn't be growing veggies in it. Thanks.